Today I'm going to show you how to use iron-on adhesive to make quilt squares like this one. So I remember a quilt when I was a little girl and probably lots of people have seen it, the little girl with the bonnet and the little dress. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. So the first step is I'm doing my quilt pattern 8 inches by 8 inches, the squares, and then I'm going to put my image on top of it. What I did is I just looked up pictures on the internet of quilts I liked or ones that had some meaning to me, and I drew it out. I got a little piece of paper and I drew my image on it, and then I cut it out and I put it on these pieces of paper, which is a cardstock. Okay, so I've got my pattern pieces here. This is a pretty simple one. We've got the dress here, we've got a little bonnet. Which way does it go? Here we go, we've got a bonnet, we've got a foot, we've got an arm, and a hand. Okay, so this, what I'm using here is Heat and Bond, the light. It's just, there's paper on one side, and on the other side, I don't know if you can zoom into this, it's just a little bit, it looks a little shimmery. It's just a tiny, tiny bit of glue on there. And it's gonna make things a lot easier for you to sew and without it sliding around. So I just get my cardstock pieces of pattern that you've created, and I'm gonna trace it on here. When I drew my pattern pieces out, I don't know if you can see here, this is where the bonnet will actually go up to my pattern, but I left a tiny bit extra just so there's a little overlap. That makes me feel better because if I'm a little off on my sewing, you're not gonna see the background 8 by 8 square color. So I just left myself a little wiggle room there. Okay, so here I am at my ironing board. Here's my 8 by 8 square that I'm going to use for the background. I've got my pieces right here of my girl, the bonnet, dress, foot, and hand. And these are of the iron-on adhesive. So I've got everything ready. My iron is hot. What I'm going to do, just for simplicity of things and to make it a little more matchy, I'm going to do the bonnet and the feet the same color. I thought that would be nice to have her match. So now I'm using the wrong side of the fabric here. And this is the kind that I got. You just need 2 seconds of a press, and that's done. I'm just going to let it cool a little. It works a little better if I do that.
I'm going to do the little foot over here, and just little bonnet. I love these little girls, they're so cute when they're done. 2 seconds there. I'm going to have her have a little brown hand. Right here, again on the wrong side of my fabric. And I have a little overlap on the hand as well, again, because, oops, you know, I'm missing her little arm. And this will be the color of her dress. I'm glad I caught that. I have a little overlap on the hand though as well, so that on her cuff, if I'm not spot on with my sewing, it's not a big deal.
So then this time I'm getting my sewing scissors. I'm not touching the iron-on adhesive that I put on there. Otherwise, you're just cutting through paper. And you'll wreck your scissors. Don't wreck your scissors. Some people like to put it, just kind of a chunk of it, of the iron-on adhesive on the fabric, and then cut it out from there. But then you're really wrecking your scissors. So it is an extra step to trace it onto the iron-on adhesive and then trace it or put it on here and cut it out again. But I like to do that because then I save my scissors. If you have a pair of old scissors and want to do that, it is a quicker step, but I don't have an old pair of scissors, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, so now I'm preparing my fabric. As you can see, it's the good side here, and I have ironed on the iron-on adhesive on this side. I've peeled off all the rest of these guys, and I'm going to peel off this one. So if you can look closely here, there's a little bit of an outer rim that I left. I'm just going to grab that with my nail. It's actually really easy to peel off. I like this brand a lot. Okay, now I'm going to arrange these how I want on my piece of fabric here. And then again, it's just 2 seconds. There we go, it stays on. Pretty cool, right? You're like halfway there. Okay, I'm back at my machine now. Before I start sewing on my quilt square, what I did first was I just tested out some of the stitches on my machine. So I just got a scrap piece of fabric and I did a row of each of the ones that I thought I might like for this, and then I labeled each one. Now I did have to bear in mind that on this piece of fabric, it doesn't have any kind of backing, so as you can see it puckered a bit. But it won't do that on your fabric on your quilt square because we have a backing on there. We have used the adhesive to put it onto our fabric. So as you can see, it's pretty stuck on here, and that helps it so that it doesn't move while we are stitching. The first stitch I'm going to do is one that kind of takes a bite out of the fabric. By that I mean it stays on the side. It's this one right here. It goes on the side of your fabric and then it takes a bite every time it chomps into your fabric, and that will hold it in place. So before I start anything, I just lower my needle down just so that I know exactly where I'm going to start. So something to notice, when I was doing my practice stitches, I noticed that when I reverse in some of these, it doesn't follow my exact trail backwards. On this one in particular, it does it at a diagonal the opposite way, and I don't want that. So instead of back stitching for this stitch, I'm just going to overlay my stitch, which means I'll start here, and then when I end, I'll overlap that stitch a little bit so it will automatically overlock it for me. Okay, you can see how this turned out. So my stitch mainly went on the outside, and then it came in 2 stitches to take a bite out of it, and that will help it stay in place. And I'm going to go ahead and do that for the arm, and it's hard to see the arm right now. You can see the little hand, but it's hard to see this arm until I outline it with thread. And I'm choosing to do a light colored thread because I want to be able to see the thread. Depending on your pattern, you might want to do it so that you can't see your stitch. I really love to see the stitch, so I did a light color here. Okay, there you go, folks. There's your finished quilt square, and you're ready to sew it onto your quilt. Have fun!